Welcome back to the Chris HOJ-Cast. This is the Chris HOJ-Cast episode 15. And for this episode number, I had a choice of 15s to talk about, those being either Patrick Mahomes, a member of the collection who wears number 15, and Nikola Jokic, also a member of the collection who wears number 15. And since I've done quite a bit of Mahomes content recently on the HOJ-Cast, including what, if I may say so, proved to be a rather encyclopedic breakdown of all of Mahomes's memorabilia autograph cards from 2017, which can be found on YouTube and which should be consumed through YouTube rather than podcast because it shows visuals of all of his different memorabilia autograph cards. But anyway, since I've already done that, and and I haven't really done nearly as much on collecting Jokic, I'm going to dedicate episode 15 to talking at least a bit about Jokic. This episode will get into some Jokic stuff, but it's going to get into more than that too. So here's basically the rundown for today's show, bearing in mind that that the next 2.5 weeks are going to be quite busy. Then it's going to include uh, the National, which is about a week and a half away, and then that's going to be a very busy week for all of us at Card Ladder, Josh, Christina, Nick, and myself. And then after the National, there'll be a decompressed time. So and then the week leading up to the Nationals is going to be very busy too, and some traveling and stuff. So I just think that this is probably the only HOJ-Cast that's going to come out over, I'd say, the next 3 weeks. So I don't think there will be one next week. I don't think there will be one the week after, which is the week of the National. And then the week after the National, I don't think you'll get a HOJ-Cast during that week, at least not till the end of the week. And so since today is Friday, the end of that week would be Friday. That would be 3 weeks from today. I would say that's the earliest that there will be another HOJ-Cast. So maybe we'll go a little bit long today, even though I always want to try and keep it short, but you try to give a little bit of content that can last over a 3 week hiatus, because I do fear that we're staring down the barrel of a 3 week long barren period, lacking any HOJ-Casts. So with that said, I am very excited about today's episode. And there's so much here. So many of the things I love to talk about are in this episode. And so here's a preview. First, I'm going to go over my pre-national bounty list as both an exercise in practicality, in case anybody who happens to watch this or listen to this knows the whereabouts or could help me locate one of these cards. And please know that anyone who middlemans a deal for me will be compensated generously for that. And don't feel awkward about asking about that as well. I completely understand that people's time and resources and network are things of value, and I don't expect things for free. But of my own volition, I will initiate that compensation too. So you also don't need to bring it up at all. I'll make sure that I do. So that's the practical element. And then there's a theoretical element. It's going to provide me an opportunity to talk a little bit at length about why each of these cards are on my pre-national bounty list, and why I'm pursuing these, and why I'd go out of my way to sort of really try to let it be known that I'm looking for these with the hopes that maybe it will help turn them up. The second thing that we'll be going over is I'm going to do my Nikola Jokic bit to introduce him to the channel, as I've already introduced Purdy. I've introduced McCaffrey. Haven't introduced Michael Jordan yet. He also doesn't really need much of an introduction, but maybe I'll save that for like episode 23 or something, or maybe I won't be able to wait and I'll just do it in an upcoming episode. I've done a bit of introduction of Mahomes. Haven't gone into the depth that I went into with McCaffrey and Purdy, but Mahomes, Jordan, they don't really need quite as much explanation. Haven't really done anything on Le'Veon Bell, and he's a non-trivial member of the PC. Maybe he'll get some treatment at some point here. especially if I pick up a nice card of his at some point. It's been a little while, been a bit of a Bell drought. It's very difficult to find his best card. Steelers collectors can be steel traps of sorts, and pun intended. And then we can go. And then Luca. I'll probably save talking about Luca until maybe closer to the regular season. And then there's Jokic, who on the one hand he doesn't need that much of an introduction. Bleacher Report just published its greatest players of all time list, and it had him at 17th, had Giannis at 24th, had Luca maybe in the 50s somewhere. The list was biased against active players, or maybe a different way of putting it, the list was biased in favor of cumulative career accomplishments to some extent, but which is fine. But everybody has the right to make their list however they'd like. But I just bring that up to say, like Jokic, it's even if I think that's very conservative, putting him 17th of all time. I think he's higher already. But even if we do say that he's 17th all time, does a player at that status need introducing the way that a McCaffrey or a Purdy does, or do they fall more in the Mahomes MJ tier? And maybe he's more in the Mahomes MJ tier, but I also think that his career is so impressive that I'm going to go over it. And maybe it's unnecessary. Maybe people don't need to hear it. Maybe I'm preaching to the choir. I love preaching to the choir, but I'm going to do it anyway. Uh, I would love if somebody else did it. How about that? So I'll do it. I'll make what's the old adage? Make the content that you want to consume. That's what I'll be doing today. After we do the Jokic bit, which is the second segment of the show, we'll get to the third, which I'm calling To Spreadsheet or Not to Spreadsheet. And with the assistance of ChatGPT, I'm going to dive into two somewhat complementary but somewhat conflicting collecting philosophies that sort of can be summarized at the highest level as either it is either a collecting approach that just really doesn't rely on spreadsheets full of information versus a collecting approach that does rely on spreadsheets of information. And you may be interested or surprised to find out where I land on this and how I reconcile them. And then the fourth and the final segment, we'll bring it back to Jokic, because I believe the spreadsheet or not to spreadsheet segment will provide a lengthy but useful preamble to the card that I'm going to discuss, which is a Jokic pickup from earlier this year. And I think that as a case study will tie together some of the observations that I'll be making throughout the duration of this podcast. So 4 segments, that's what they are. Let's get this party started. I promised first to talk about the pre-national bounty list. Admittedly, a rather self-serving portion of this podcast. And I posted this to my Instagram story 2 days ago. And let me pause on this screen. So what I have here is a screenshot of something that I typed up. I said, "This is my pre-national bounty. I will pay 150% or more of the highest comp on any of the following 90s MJ one of ones." And before I list them, let me say that this is a bit of an odd phrasing, that I'll pay 150% or more of the highest comp, because these are one of ones. So some of them don't have comps, and some that do sold years ago. I just want to make it clear that I'll pay more than whoever else is out there. Especially if there's a comp. Like I'm not going to hold somebody to a comp. I certainly recognize that that these are extremely important to me. I recognize, especially if they've sold a while ago, that the market has gone up for them. So you don't have to worry about haggling or nickel and diming with me. I mean, some of the cards I'm going to mention do have sales in the last few years that I'll pay triple of, and they're more recent sales. But let me get now to the 4 cards here. So the first one, the first is I say any true with true in quotation marks, any true base set Michael Jordan card from the 1998-99 Upper Deck Series 2. And then I specify that there are 23 of them, 230A, B, C, all the way through W. And I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about these cards. But there are 23 of them, and they're all different cards. They have a different card number, A, B, C, D, all the way to W. They have different images. They have different captions on the backside. Each of them documenting Jordan's 97-98 season in a different way. So I'm looking for those in particular, and I'll as I scroll to the next few slides, I'll show you what those look like, and we'll get into a little more depth on those. The next of the 4 bullet points of what I'm issuing this bounty for is card 290, which is recognizable as having the Highway 99 theme. So it's also from Upper Deck Series 2. Comes a little later in the base set than the 230s, and it has a theme. You'll see the card when I show an image of it shortly. It says Highway 99 on it. I know that this card was last seen in 2019. We'll get to that as I scroll through the slides to talk about each one of these. Card number 23, which is game dated from 1998-99 Upper Deck Series 1. So this card is instantly recognizable as Jordan's only game dated card in 98-99 Upper Deck, and it's in Series 1. And then finally, the fourth bullet is card number 1, the first card in the base set, which is Michael Jordan from 1998-99 SPX Finite, and it's called the Extreme 1-of-1 Parallel. So let's go through each of these one by one. And I'm going to save the 230s for last because I'm going to go a little deeper on those and bring in some other materials here too. So let's save those. Let's go to this Highway 99 first. You can see the image on your screen. It's got a Highway 99 symbol in the back that's integral to the card's design, and then it also, running vertically, reads Highway 99 in gold foil. This card was last seen in 2019 and recorded a comp at auction for around $8,000. Certainly worth multiples more of that today, and would love to track that one down. And I know it's out there, and I know it's in circulation. And the auction house that it sold through was PWCC. So it was visible. It's out there. It's somewhere. Maybe it's in a vault. Maybe it's in a dealer showcase. Maybe it's deep in a collection, and it'll never see the light of day again. But it is out there, and I am interested. Next, here's the game dated. This is what the game dated card looks like. It's a horizontally oriented card rather than a vertically oriented card. In the top left, it has a big logo for game dated. And then above Jordan's nameplate, it specifies that this card is thematically representing the February 8th, 1998 All-Star game from the 1997-98 season, where Jordan pours in 23 points for the East and he wins All-Star game MVP. And then the backside caption explains further, Jordan led the East All-Stars to a victory in the All-Star game on February 8th in New York and was selected as the game's MVP. So this is the first appearing Michael Jordan card in the 1998-99 Upper Deck base set, and it belongs to Series 1. The image that I'm showing of it is the bronze out of 100, but there is a gold 1-of-1, but it's never been seen, or it's never publicly surfaced, at least not in my research. The third card was the finite, the extreme 1-of-1. I'm showing a picture on the screen of the Spectrum out of 350, which is one of the parallels to this card. And the Spectrum out of 350 is beautiful because it has Jordan in this bold, crisp red Bulls uniform, and the color associated with the Spectrum out of 350 is red. That particular parallel is red. So the jersey color match of it is stunning. The extreme is purple rather than red. Purple is a nice 1-of-1 color that was a hallmark of some of the 1-of-1s from the 90s, like the 1998-99 Ultra 1-of-1, which is a purple 1-of-1. But I surely wish that the extreme 1-of-1 actually had been red, because look at how beautiful this works. It would make for a terrific color match on the 1-of-1 level. But instead it's purple, and that actually benefits Kobe. So Kobe is in this set. He has a purple 1-of-1 that belongs to the collection of Spinatron. And now let me go back to the final portion of the bounty that I'm issuing, and or have issued, and it's not like a bounty with like a cash amount or anything. So let me not try to make this bounty into something that it's not. This is just a call. This is my cry for help, a call for attention. My desire to let people know without putting a specific dollar figure on it, so that I don't end up negotiating against myself too much, that I'm going to pay very strong. I'm going to pay over market for any of these cards if they should turn up. And and then and some of them, I it, I don't. It's very hard to triangulate market on these. Like, how do you figure out the market for the SPX finite extreme 1 of 1? you know, if somebody comes out and says, "Yeah, I think the market is 500,000 on this," well, then I'm out, or I'll have to do some serious consolidating to make that work. But the market on some of these other ones is way lower than that, and and so that's why I'm kind of panicky. I'm so excited to try and get these while I can. And so anyway, the last one, and the ones that I'm most excited about, are these. These are the 230s from 98.99 Upper Deck, and they belong to Series 2. And I note here in the caption to this particular post, I'm showing an image of 230A, which I have the gold 1 of, and I also note, heads up, I already have 10 of these. I have 10 of the 23. And I was talking to my friend Joe, and he I think listened to the HOJ-Cast episode 14 and a little bit of it, and maybe heard me talking about it a bit. And then I posted it to Instagram too, or maybe that's where he saw it. And he was talking to me a bit about 98.99 Upper Deck, and then I mentioned to him that I have 10. I don't have just the one. I have 10. And he's like, "Well, how the heck did you get 10? Did you get 10 in the last 2 weeks?" And not quite the last 2 weeks, but I got 230A in the first week of June. It arrived here from Japan, and as soon as I got the card in hand, and sort of my mind had taken some time to process like where I think this card stands in relation to the rest of Michael Jordan's card offering. As soon as that sort of sunk in, I kind of I kind of went into a panic or a frenzy and decided that I think that these are cards that really line up with my collecting values, and what I like and what I want my PC to look like. And they match up so many different philosophies that I believe in, from how excited I am to collect Michael Jordan, how excited I am to collect 1 of 1s, how much I love base set 1 of 1s. And so I just went on a tear, quite honestly, trying to track these down. And they did start surfacing. I got a great assist from a fellow Jordan collector and a friend. After I posted this to my story, he said, "Hey, I happen to know a guy who has a few more of these," and he corresponds by email, and he's in Europe, but I've done deals with him. They went smoothly. So here's his info if you'd like it. And I connected, and he had 4 of these, and I immediately got all 4. And then a few more showed up. A few more showed up. 3 more showed up in Germany. So that brought that was 7 new ones that I got in addition to the 230A from Japan. That makes 8. And then I have a trade agreed to already with a great Michael Jordan collector in Switzerland, who has 2. And part of our deal was he happens to prefer the Ultimate Victory Gold 1 of 1s more than he likes the 98.99 Upper Deck Series 2. I haven't really talked about the Ultimate Victory 1 of 1s at all, but I think we'll get there at some point. There will be an opportunity and content to talk about those. They are magnificent. They are so visually appealing and stunning. They belong to 1999 2000 Ultimate Victory, which is a product line from Upper Deck. But he prefers those to these, and I prefer these to those, which may be a mistake on my part. But anyway, he said, "Yeah, if you can get these 2 Ultimate Victories, I'll do a straight up trade for my 2 98.99 Series 2 Gold 1 of 1s from the 230s." And we agreed. So the trade has been agreed to. We just have to work out the logistics of how we're going to do the swap, and we'll figure that out. I'm sure that swap will take place in the next few months. We'll get that settled. So that's how I get to 10. And then I do happen to know the precise location of 6 more. Two of them are overseas. I won't say more than that. Two of them are in the continental overseas. One is also overseas, but on an island. Two are with one of the greatest collectors that I know, that I'm aware of, here in the United States, and then one is with another one of the greatest collectors I know, who also happens to be in the United States. So that brings it up to six, where I actually know the physical whereabouts of, and they will be in varying degrees difficult to acquire, and I might not be able to get some of them, which is fine, but I'm going to try. Um, and 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 so that speaks to those six. So that's 16 accounted for. 10 that I either have or have agreed to in principle, and then six that I've located, and then that leaves seven to be discovered still. And of those seven that are so there's 16 where I specifically know where they are. Either they're with me, they've been agreed to be traded to me, or they're with specific collectors that I've spoken to directly. And I know that they have them. They know that I'm interested, and hopefully we can reach a deal. Maybe we won't be able to. Or maybe it'll take years and I'll just chip away like a sculptor who's been uh, condemned to just make one chip at a block, one chip per day, and just slowly chip away over years. Which is fine, actually. I don't mind that that the pursuit might extend, and I expect that it will. Although my ultimate ambition is to unite all 23. So anyway, so that brings us up to 16 that I know specifically where they are, and then there's seven that that current whereabouts are unknown. Now, among those seven, six of them have made a public appearance at some point. Five of them I have a public sales record of that happened some point over the last 20 years, and then uh, this the sixth one, it hasn't sold, but it is graded. It does show up in the population report. So 22 of the 23 have surfaced at some point. 16 I can precisely pinpoint their location. The one that is a mystery, the mystery card, is 230M. So all the others, A, B, C, it's D, E, etc., accounted for all the way through W, except for M. 230M is a mystery, and we'll see. We'll see if that one ever shows its face. Maybe it's out there. Maybe it's still in a box. Maybe it's still in a 9899 Upper Deck Series 2 box. So why the 230s? Why these? I've had some people ask me that. I've had some people get my answer and then push back against it, which is fine. Obviously, that we all don't collect in the same way, and even more to the point that we all collect differently, even if there might be some overlap in interest. I think everybody has just like a unique fingerprint. Everybody has a unique collecting fingerprint, a unique collecting philosophy. I have had inquiries to why these, like what's so special about these. This isn't this just some Jordan set or something? And if you want to see them that way, you surely can. Even the page on Trading Card Database dedicated to these describes them as 23 versions of card 230. But upon close scrutiny, I concluded, just for me, don't expect others to see it this way, don't need others to see it this way, and I welcome the debate. It can help me refine my collecting intuitions and learn things and develop my approach. Although, fair warning, I am a bit slow. I do tend to linger in the status quo or linger in my beliefs until I'm really pushed off of them. But it does happen. I do change my mind in light of new evidence. But when I scrutinize the evidence surrounding these, um, and analyze a checklist for myself rather than filtering it through what Trading Card Database is describing it as, or filtering it through the hobby's consensus. But instead, I really scrutinize it for myself. Here's a few things that I noticed. Number one, these do not belong to a set. They're not inserts, obviously. I think that much is clear. And they're not even subsets. A subset card would have some sort of carryover from one card to the next, and these cards are completely unique. They have each of them has a totally different action shot of Jordan. I'm pretty sure they're all from the 97-98 season too. At least the ones that I've photo matched so far are. They each have a different caption on the backside. So the front sides are clearly distinct. The back sides are clearly distinct. So in on those levels alone, these there isn't a way to sensibly describe these as versions or variations of each other, because nothing about them is the same on the front or the back. Or sorry, not that nothing is the same. I mean, clearly they carry the same design elements. They have the same statistical table on the back. What I mean to say is that they're not identical. There are clear differences on them, on the front side and on the back side. And then they carry a different card number too. They're 230A, 230B, 230C, etc. And so, what can we make of this once we've actually properly classified these as simply 23 base set Michael Jordan cards? And where that leads, once if one is willing to accept them as that, and if one is willing to dig in to the classification of these cards, and truly try to figure out what they are, rather than just sort of, well, trading card says they're versions of each other, or these really seem like they, they're an insert set or something, so that's how I want to see them, and that's fine. I think that it partially explains why these have these have flown under the radar for so long, and why so many of them are overseas. Is because I think overseas collectors, just for whatever reason, see them more like how I do, and American collectors have sort of just glossed over them, which I also did for almost a decade. But if we do accept them as as base set cards, and as distinct base set cards, then something very interesting emerges. So if I flip over here to the Michael Jordan checklist of all of his one of ones, and he has 7 in 1997-98, which was the first year of Michael Jordan one of ones, and then he has 65 in 1998-99, which was the second year of Michael Jordan one of ones. If we flip over to this checklist and start scrutinizing it, and so the first thing I want to notice is that the first year of Jordan one of ones, Upper Deck does have one. It's the Power Deck Audio White Jersey Variation one of one, which is an insert set, and it's a hybrid CD-ROM / sports card, and it lives in the terrific collection of Stanley Stasic 1313 on Instagram. No base set one of one parallel to 1997-98 Upper Deck. Only the one of one parallel to this Power Deck CD card. So the first time that Upper Deck ever issued base set one of one parallels was for the 1998-99 product, and they did have base set one of one parallels for Series 1. Those are game dated. The game dated card, number 23, the Heart and Soul card, number 26, which is MJ on both sides. There's also a Heart and Soul that's half MJ, half Scottie Pippen, so I don't include that as a solo Michael Jordan card. To the Net, card number 169, and then 2 checklists. So 5 cards from Series 1, which are Michael Jordan only. But the thing about those cards that stands out to me in my approach is that each of these has a theme. Each of these are themed cards, and that theme ties them together with other cards which also have this theme that happen to also belong to this base set. So there are other game dated cards, there are other Heart and Soul cards, there are other To the Net cards, there are other checklists. So these cards are something more than just cards documenting Jordan's 97-98 season. These are cards that also are enhanced thematically. And it's like, so for the game dated card, for example, it's documenting one specific game that Jordan played. And that's very cool, but it's also not quite fitting with my notion or my definition. It doesn't fit with my general idea of what a base set card is, a true base set card. It fits more with my notion of what a subset card is. Although it's not a pure subset card either, because it still has the statistical table of his career on the back, and it's like it's in this intermediate position because it has the game dated stamp for sure. That's something that's above and beyond what a traditional base card would have, but it's not, it's not exactly like an all-star subset card, or like an MVP's subset card or something either, where like the card is calling attention to this specific game. And there are other game dated cards too, but they call the attention a different game. At least some of them do. I'm not sure if any others point to the All-Star game or not. So it's like it's thematically going beyond what a traditional base set card does by taking this extra logo and this extra thematic content. But it also still has many hallmarks of a traditional base set card. It still has the normal statistical table on the back. It still has a nice action shot of Jordan. So I can see an argument both ways on that one, and obviously it's on my list. But it's not clear cut. It certainly would be to drive my point home. It would be much clearer and easier for me when classifying this particular card to call it a true base set card if it didn't have the game dated theme. Just imagine that. Imagine if it didn't have that. Imagine if instead it looked like this. If it looked like this Zydrunas Ilgauskas, card number 28. So just 5 cards behind Jordan's game dated. We have this Ilgauskas, and it doesn't have the game dated theme. This to me is closer to the notion of a true base set card. It has the design elements that are consistent across the base set cards, the game dated and the non game dated, with the sort of these 2 columns running vertically along the left and the right hand side, and then the nameplate at the bottom and this little symbol, the upper deck logo on the front, and just a very simple, clean design. But it doesn't have the extra content. It doesn't have the game dated theme to add extra content to it. It's just a traditional base card stripped down to its most core elements: a statistical table on the back, a brief caption, and the action shot on the front. And that's the content of the card. And so this Ilgauskas that I'm showing for those listening on the podcast, it sold in February 2025 for $1,000. So the big Z in the graded PSA 7. So the big Z 1 of 1 here from this upper deck base set, card number 28, $1,000. Okay. And so if we go over to the game dated, which I'll show again briefly here on the screen, the game dated certainly has those design elements that I was describing, but it also takes the game dated symbol. And then it also has and then it also takes this little extra content on the front side that sort of notes his specific achievements in this specific game. Now compare it to I'll put the picture of 230A on the screen. 230A, I'll alternate back and forth between 230A and the big Z, the Ilgauskas. These cards bear a stronger resemblance to each other. In fact, they are, for design purposes, they are identical. They have the same 2 columns on the left and right, the same nameplate, same little logo, same placement of the upper deck logo. I mean, these cards are much closer in type than the game dated is to the Ilgauskas. So to me, these 230s are Michael Jordan's true base set cards from 1998-99 upper deck. And there happens to be 23 of them. To me, it's almost like upper deck was kind of like playing catch up. Like, we didn't make any base set Michael Jordan 1 of 1s at all for his career. So let's just make up for lost time and throw 23 at you, because we didn't get to do one for 80-45. We didn't get to do one for 85-86. We didn't get to do one for 91-92. We didn't get to do one for 96-97. So let's just throw them at you, and let's make it 23. Let's give it 23 of them, because you know what? That's Michael Jordan. 23 is Michael Jordan, and these are numbered 230. Also in respect to Michael Jordan. So I happen to see these as his true base set cards, with 230A being the first appearing, 230W being the last appearing, and the other 21 in between sitting in that list. I see this as on some levels similar to my Christian McCaffrey Prism Black Finite run, which is 8 cards deep. This is 23. And I see completing this 23 card set as sort of an accomplishment that actually would be more meaningful to me even than the McCaffrey Black Finite run, which I think that is, I think that might be one of the more difficult things that I've achieved as a collector is finding all 8 of those. Well, I think getting all 23 of these might even trump that in terms of what I value as a collector. So that's how I see these. And then if we do accept that classification approach, and you don't have to, right? I mean, just to compare it to, there's lots of it, like Highway 99. I think some people might say that looks more like a 90s Jordan card. Let me put that one back on the screen. People would say the Highway 99, I mean, this looks more like what I want my 90s cards to look like. It's got this really bold, strong, creative design element, and it's got the Highway 99 concept, and it's sort of a one-off. There aren't really, to my knowledge, any other Highway 99 Jordan cards, so it's just this one-off. It's looks like what I want my 90s cards to look like: bold, colorful, thematic. Or somebody might look at the game dated and they might say, look, like this base set has, like, I think 31 different Michael Jordan cards, including the checklist, the 4 checklists that he appears on. Like, I want the first one. I don't care that it's themed. I want the first one, and the first one is the game dated. And then furthermore, Michael Jordan has other game dated base set appearances from earlier issues of Upper Deck. So this isn't like they just busted out this game dated theme for the first time here. There is some tradition of Upper Deck base set cards being game dated. And then furthermore, there are some players in the 1998-99 Upper Deck base set whose only card is a game dated themed card. So maybe that mitigates in favor of game dated cards are just as much true base set cards, because some players only got the game dated card. I don't see it that way, because I don't think if a player only appears, and let's stipulate too that this is a subset. If a player only appears in the subset, that means that it can't be a subset. I don't think that's right. And I'm sure there's historical examples of players and sets over the history of sports cards where everybody agrees that a particular type of card is a subset, and a player's only appearance is in that subset, and that doesn't suddenly negate it from being a subset just because it's a player's only appearance. But these are subjective expressions of value, and these are subjective expressions of the logic of card cataloging and of card classification. And so we're free to make our own value choices at those levels. But the principles of logic, such as the principle of non-contradiction and the principle of identity, these two laws of logic in particular, which I encourage collectors and sports fans who are making list ranking things to refresh themselves on the study of logic, because I find a lot of people actually violating these principles of meta logic, the principle, the law of non-contradiction, the law of identity. So that is the thing that I do expect of opposing people's methodologies, is that they can make whatever subjective value judgments they want, but once the value judgment is made, I expect it to be consistently applied in a way that doesn't contradict itself. So if, for example, somebody is willing to say that the game dated is the true base card, that's fine. But then I expect to see that same, whatever the reasoning is that gets them to decide that it is the true base set card. Maybe they'll say, well, my reason is that even if a card is themed and has content above and beyond just the action shot and the statistical table and the caption, if a player is only, if there are other players in the set whose only card is the game dated card, then that means that the game dated is the base set card. Well, then I expect to see that logic applied in all other contexts too. And as long as those meta logic principles are observed, I don't have any quibbles with that methodology. I don't make the same value judgments at the outset, but I will respect the application of consistent reasoning. So that gets me back to the core point here. Why am I so excited about the 230s? And I hope I've done a fair job of acknowledging the points of view that aren't as excited about the 230s and that might prefer other cards more, because there are certainly those points of view out there. But the thing that activates me about the 230s is that I do believe that these are Michael Jordan's first true base set cards in 98-99 Upper Deck. They are indisputably his first base set cards of any variety, true or not, subset or not. They are his first in Series 2, which Series 2 is a very interesting product itself. I wrote about it on my Instagram caption when I posted this. I won't go into it again here. But if you collapse Series 2 and Series 1 and include both, I still find that these are the first and the only true base set cards that he has in there. And then if that is in fact true, then that makes these his first Upper Deck, his first true base set Upper Deck one of ones ever made. And then it also just so happens to come from the final season of Upper Deck products that chronicle his final playing days cards as a Bull. So suddenly, upon a very careful review of what these cards actually are, and upon the application of classification principles, having reviewed all the different ways to look at it, I actually find that is where I land on these, is that the 230s are Michael Jordan's first upper deck base set one of ones, true base set cards. Having concluded that, I find that these are extremely special cards, and I do find them in some ways to be tantamount, like I referenced before, to completing the Christian McCaffrey Prism Black Finite run. And so I understand that I've expressed a point of view here. I've expressed an opinion, and I've said things that probably some people will disagree with. Some people will look at differently. Some people might roll their eyes at. Some of the rebuttals that could happen here is that my approach is just it's too specific. This isn't the way the market works. This isn't the way people think. This is too much in the weeds, and that for example, like the fact that these are, there's 23 of these, it makes it confusing. How do people search these? How do people find them? 230A, B, C, etc. How these are impractical to locate, or this is just this is simply a few levels of abstraction beyond what the card market will bear. So that's a rebuttal that sort of says, like, even if everything I've so that's like a generous rebuttal to me that says, even if everything you said is true, you're still too far beneath the surface. You're still too far in the weeds for these cards to mean as much as you think that they mean, at least to others. And that person would probably be happy for me that I've found through my methods, I've located meaning, and that should be enough. They would say that these mean this to me, and it certainly is enough. And I really enjoy going back and forth and sort of discussing the principles that are in play here, and sort of, if somebody disagrees with me, sort of fleshing out their classification system and fleshing out mine, and sort of seeing where we disagree, seeing if there's something I can learn from them, and just refining my own approaches more by learning more and more from what other people say. And then and so, like, I hope that I've covered a lot of different points of view here that go against mine, without ceding the fact that I still do believe what I believe, and I don't just feel that this is a Russian roulette or something, or this is just like, just pick whichever, and whatever, whichever way it comes out, they're all equally valid points of view. I don't quite feel that way. I do feel like, upon scrutiny, I feel like I've arrived at the answer that I think is the right one for classifying cards. But there are competing points of view, and there are strong competing points of view. And I think the one that's most directly opposed is the one that looks at something like the Highway 99 card, and says, well, this card is really more of a 90s Jordan card. This card is just flat out more desirable. And I can't argue with that. I don't agree with it, but I can't argue with it, because we're in the realm of subjective judgments and opinions. And then the strongest pushback will come from the card 23, the game dated, where people will say, look, game dated has a history of belonging to the upper deck base sets. Some players only have the game dated, and it's the first appearing Jordan card, so that one certainly should be more desirable than the 230s. So those are some of the competing points of view there. But you can see where I landed, and I feel like I owe both of those explanations. I owe the explanation of how and why I've accumulated 10 so quickly, why I want to unite all 23, why I think these cards are very collectible and special from what I value as a collector and how I classify things. So I owe both of those explanations, both what I'm up to, what I'm doing, that I've gotten 10, I'm trying to get all 23, and why am I so passionate about these? Why have I suddenly had such a tunnel vision focusing on these? Why am I issuing a bounty to get them? So I hope I've explained the rationale there, and why this is such an exciting collector goal for me. I literally could talk about these. I mean, I just feel like I need to move on, but I feel like we're to the next segment of the show, but I feel like we're just scratching the surface of discussing the 1998-99 upper deck and Michael Jordan's place in it. It's such a content rich subject, and maybe there'll be more opportunities to talk about it in the future. In fact, I'm sure there will be. But it's time to move on to part 2 here. It's time to move on to part 2, which I have described as introducing Nikola Jokic. Segment 2, introducing Nikola Jokic. So I've sort of laid out a blueprint of how I do this with McCaffrey, how I did it with Purdy, and now I'm going to do it with Jokic. And I'm going to fly through some stuff here, so just buckle up. Basketball Reference is my go-to website for the history of the statistics of basketball, NBA and ABA. Although I really only look at NBA stuff, but eventually I think I'll take a closer look at ABA stuff at some point. NBA, for NBA, they offer 3 catch-all metrics, and a catch-all metric is a very powerful metric in concept. A catch-all is it tries to summarize in one number something that is spread out across multiple areas of information, whether it's combining just raw box score statistics or whether it's trying to measure impact on winning. That is the power of a catch-all. Is that sort of it, and it goes back to this logic idea that I was talking about in the previous segment. This sort of idea that a catch-all cannot violate the law of non-contradiction because it is applying the exact same criteria, ingesting the exact same statistical information, and applying the exact same weights and algorithmic compression of that information to produce a number. So it is literally the exact same mode of analysis being applied to every player. Now, there can be the need for era adjustments and context adjustments too, and the best stats will make the best advanced stats will apply those adjustments in universally consistent ways too. But sort of that's the appeal in a nutshell of a catch-all, is that it's a neat way to remove the player level bias. Now, there's still bias at the level of methodology, which is the best way to evaluate players, but it evaluates every player exactly the same. We certainly don't run the risk of the eye test fallacy, which is where somebody who has watched 0.0001% of the totality of NBA games in the history of the league believes that their eye test is going to be able to allow them to compare every player that's ever played, when they probably haven't even watched the majority of players who played in the league play. Let me not dwell on that. So anyway, Basketball Reference has 3 catch-alls, and the one that I think is most methodologically sound is box plus minus. Its methodology, very briefly, is that it takes a large sample of regularized adjusted plus minus data, which is using ridge regression applied to an adjusted plus minus sample that controls for quality of teammates over, like I said, a 20-year sample, and it isolates which player relative to a league average player increases the margin of victory for their team. Again, like I said, controlling for the quality of opponents, controlling for the quality of teammates, and therefore controlling for garbage time too, because if they're in playing against the other team's backups, that's going to be accounted for. So box plus minus takes this regularized adjusted plus minus sample across 20 years roughly, and then the earlier edition was a 14-year sample, but I believe the later, the BPM 2.0, goes up against a 20-year regularized adjusted plus minus sample, and it identifies all these different statistical criteria from the box score, hence the name box plus minus. It associates how all these different box score productions are tied together with regularized adjusted plus minus outcomes. It places these different statistical categories with a particular position that a player occupies, and not just the position that shows up in their box score, like, oh, this guy played the 4 position according to the box score. No, they calculate position based on the style of play that the player actually plays, and regressing that against how all of the other players who've ever played the game have played. And so that LeBron James might be listed as as a power forward in the game's box score, but really his position for the purpose of box plus minus is much closer to a point guard because of the amount of facilitating that he does and his usage rate and stuff like that. So they associate statistical production with performative positions, and then they in terms of how it lines up with impact on winning is measured by regular just plus minus, and then box plus minus says, all right, we're going to take and we're going to find the strongest correlations that a given player's box score associates with. We're going to find which regularized adjusted plus minus profile that it's most strongly correlated with, and then it's a genius methodological move. It's just such a clever way to solve the problem of regularized adjusted plus minus, which is that it just exists in too small of samples. It can be too noisy, but if you spread it out over 20 years, it helps. But nobody plays 20 years. But when you have this robust sample, you can actually say, well, so to bring it down to concrete to the ground level here, to try and make it really specific. And they're saying that a player who puts up, we're talking about Jokic, a guy who averaged 30, 13, and 10 this year on a true shooting percentage of 65%. A guy who plays his functional position, who puts up those metrics on that efficiency, that statistical profile is correlated with a regularized adjusted plus minus of plus 13, which is what Jokic's BPM was this year. So it's a fantastic way to solve the noisiness and the small sample problem of regularized adjusted plus minus. It brings in the box score, which is more intuitive for people. And a study that I saw from UCLA from Simon Zhao, he concluded, I haven't looked at the actual study itself, but he concluded and summarized that box plus minus actually is more predictive of regularized adjusted plus minus results than regularized adjusted plus minus itself, which sort of speaks to the small sample noisiness problem. I went way too far into methodology there, much further than I wanted to, so let me not do that for any of these other stats. Suffice it to say that box plus minus for career has Nikola Jokic in first at 10.28, Michael Jordan in second, 9.21, LeBron James, 8.53, fourth, Luka, 7.63, fifth, Magic Johnson, 7.54. There's your top 10 in box plus minus. So box plus minus is indicating that on a per minute basis, based on how much of his career has been played so far, with all the caveats in place that career figures don't include the twilight seasons. So after a player is done with their prime run, and I don't think Nikola Jokic is, so I think his BPM still very well could increase, but after it's done, then it's going to decrease somewhat too, and then we'll just have to see where it says. But and box plus minus is a rate statistic, a per possession statistic, that then gets normalized over the course of a full game. So his per possession, on a per possession basis, career box plus minus, highest ranking player in Basketball Reference history. Then we go over to VORP, which is just the cumulative version of box plus minus. It's just box plus minus times minutes played. He's 22nd all time. He's at 73. Now he's putting up he's putting up VORPs in the neighborhood of like 10 to 12 each season, and he's done that pretty consistently for the last half decade. If he has another half decade of that, which like maybe he will, maybe he won't, maybe there'll be some drop off by the time he's 35, 34, 35, 36. But let's just say that over the rest of his, let's say over the next half decade, if he just repeats what he did over the last half decade, he will surge to third. He will be comfortably in third in VORP. So I would expect, barring catastrophic injury, that his cumulative BPM is going to end up in the top three. And LeBron is first in VORP with a bullet, 156. Michael Jordan second, 116. John Stockton third, 106. So Stockton's presence on here indicates, one, that he was a very high impact player as measured by BPM, but second, that he just played a really, really long time. But I think Jokic has a real clear path to get into the top three, and maybe even higher. Okay, then we have the second of Basketball Reference's three advanced statistics. So I just showed you two, but really it's one. It's BPM, and then it's the cumulative of BPM. I'm counting that as one. Second one here is win shares per 48. Nikola Jokic is also first. So this is a per 48 minutes statistic, and he's first in it. Jordan is second. David Robinson is third. Wilt Chamberlain is fourth, and Neil Johnston is fifth. And then in the cumulative version of this metric, Jokic is 44th. And so if his past is predictive of what the next half decade is going to look like for him. He'll be getting very close to the top 5 by the time he's in his mid 30s. In terms of cumulative win shares, Kareem is first with 273. LeBron is second with 271. LeBron should surpass Kareem in this metric by the end of this season. Wilt Chamberlain is third, 247. Karl Malone is fourth. Chris Paul is fifth. Michael Jordan is sixth. John Stockton is seventh. So Jokic has a pretty clear path here to cracking top 10, probably top 5. And then the third and final advanced metric, which does not have a cumulative version, is player efficiency rating, which is a per minute statistic. Jokic is first in that too. He has a PER career of 28.51. Michael Jordan is second. LeBron James is third. So across every advanced metric that Basketball Reference has, on the rate basis, on the per minute or the per possession basis, whichever way the statistic is measured, Jokic is the greatest statistical player on each of these lists. And on the cumulatives, on the two that have cumulative lists, he's got a pretty clear path, barring a big injury, to finishing in the top 10, if not the top 5. So there's a statistical introduction to Jokic, and now let me do the MVPs bit. So on the MVPs side of things, for Jokic, well, first we'll do statistical MVPs, which is so I just walked through those 3 different rate-based statistics that Basketball Reference offers. If you look at on a season-by-season basis, which player had the highest rank per season across all 3, Kareem had the highest rank 11 times across his career, 11 different seasons. He had the highest average rank across those 3. Michael Jordan, 9. Wilt Chamberlain, 8. So those are the 3 guys who have had the highest rank across Basketball Reference's 3 catch-all statistics for a season. And then Jokic and LeBron are tied with 5 apiece. Each of them have led the league in the average rank across those 3 5 times. So there, he's cracked the top 5 there. Now we have voted on MVPs, the regular season MVP and the finals MVP, and or what I call total MVPs. This is not including conference finals MVPs. This is not including All-Star Game MVPs. This is just finals MVP or regular season MVP. Michael Jordan has the most with 11. LeBron James and Kareem are tied with 8. Magic has 6. Duncan, Bird, Wilt, and Bill Russell have 5. And then you have Jokic, Shaq, and Moses Malone with 4. So by this approach, which I think is the most in step with the casual fan, with the mainstream fan, Jokic here is 9th, or he's in a 3-way tie for 9th with Shaq and Moses Malone, who each have 4 total MVPs. And if he can get a 5th somehow, and just one more regular season or one more finals MVP, now he's tied with Tim and Larry and Wilt and Russell. That's how close he is, I think, to having a really strong top 5 all-time case on the casual level. And then if we go to total MVPs, which combine the statistical MVPs, which sort of controls for situations where you have a Derrick Rose MVP, nothing against Derrick Rose, but LeBron was clearly the top statistical player that year. So if you sort of combine, let's see how many statistical MVPs plus voted upon MVPs people have, and let's combine those. You get Michael with 20, Kareem with 19, LeBron and Wilt with 13 each, and then Jokic and Bird with 9 each. So I just can't really approach analyzing the game in the ways that I do, relying heavily on catch-alls and advanced statistics and the things that evaluate every player equally. I can't find really a route that doesn't score Jokic incredibly high, and certainly much higher than 17th. Although the argument for the 17th from Bleacher Report, for that list that they just put out, the argument there is that they must be leaning pretty heavily into cumulative, but they rank Jordan over LeBron. So what is the criteria here that if cumulative is so important, LeBron has the edge on Jordan, in at least in terms of VORP. He's first all time in VORP. He's about to be first all time in win shares after this season. So if the cumulative stuff is so important, but I guess the cumulative argument for Jordan is that, well, look at his cumulative awards, accolades, total MVPs. Maybe that's what gives him the edge. But then if we're going to look at that, then Jokic must be higher than 17th because his cumulative awards, put him in a three-way tie for 9th. So I just think I can't get to 17th. I don't know how you have him that low. But he wasn't the only player ranked too low. Giannis was ranked 24th. That's way too low for Giannis as well. Giannis is in the crew that has 3 total MVPs. So he should, he's up there tied for 19th. I think he was, 5-ish positions too low. Gilgeous-Alexander, they didn't even have him in the top 60. I mean, Gilgeous-Alexander is one of only 5. He's only one of 25 players in NBA history who has 2 total MVPs or more. So that list was just it was tough on active players. Last thing I'll say about Jokic, if all this advanced stuff and total MVP stuff is just not your cup of tea, then I'll make one more case for Jokic. There are 2 players in NBA history who for their careers have averaged at least 20 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 assists per game. They are Larry Bird and Nikola Jokic. Among them, if we wanted to sort of sort them by their efficiency, Jokic has a 56% career field goal percentage, 36% from 3, and 82% from the line. And Bird is 49.6 field goal percentage, 37.6 from 3, 88.6 from the line. So Jokic is just a more efficient version of it. He's a more efficient scorer. Then you can make your arguments about defense and stuff. I have Bird higher all time. Bird has more total MVPs, and he and Jokic are tied with the combination of statistical and total MVPs. Jokic has one more statistical MVP. I think Jokic has a slight edge statistically over Bird. I think Bird has an edge in terms of career accolades. But I think this is perhaps the best way to sort of on a very basic level using statistics that everybody understands situate Jokic is that he's quite similar to Bird. He and Bird the only guys 2010 and 5 guys in NBA history. So thank you for allowing me to do that Jokic introduction, which I've done, for some other PC players too, especially the ones who might, there might be information about them that you're learning for the first time when listening to this. So let me get to part 3 of this show, which I have called To Spreadsheet or Not to Spreadsheet. So I don't want to, this is going to feel like a really abrupt jump from talking about Jokic, like as a basketball player, to then jumping over to a collecting philosophy. But I'm going to merge Jokic as a basketball player and the collecting philosophy discussion I'm about to get into. I'm going to merge them for section 4. So, to spreadsheet or not to spreadsheet? What does this mean? I think that that there is a really interesting tension, disagreement, conflict in collecting approaches that I internally have, and that content creators and really thoughtful people who think deeply about collecting and think about the community of collecting and the marketplace of ideas that inhabits the collecting space, they really think deeply about it, and they put out really thoughtful arguments that sort of express why they approach collecting the way that they do, or the values that they think they would like the collecting community to embody, things like that. And it's sort of resulted in this a really interesting philosophical clash between collecting, and this is a caricature that I'm going to propose, but anything that's overly simplified will be a caricature. There's the non-spreadsheet approach, which is just sort of collecting from the heart, or really more specifically, collecting from the gut. That just if you're just sort of sitting on your couch and you're just on a sort of an eBay scroll, and all of a sudden your heart stops and you see a card that just really speaks to you, that you don't need to consult the spreadsheet. You don't need to review the hierarchy. You don't need to review the lists. You don't need to know where it ranks in somebody else's ranking. You don't need to know any of that. You don't need to know how many other parallels does it have, or how significant is this card to this player's catalog. You don't need to know any of that, and it can really, the thinking goes, this can really bog you down. This can really distract you from the joys and really the purpose of collecting, and the thrill of collecting. It can distract you if you sort of if these things become an obstacle, and instead really embrace that moment, because this is really what collecting is all about. This is really what makes collecting different from anything else, is that excitement, that rush, that visceral connection, that nostalgic connection, the memories that it evokes, uh, the joy, the circulation of blood that follows, the increased heart rate, the rush of knowing that this could be a mail day coming soon, and it just all sort of culminates in this, like, just collect from the gut, trust your gut, collect from the gut, and if something speaks to you, don't overthink it, don't over rationalize it, don't dumb it down, don't dumb it down, don't dull it down into something transactional, into something calculated, into something scripted. That's sort of the not the non-spreadsheet philosophy, at least how I understand it. Contrast that against the spreadsheet philosophy, and the caricature of that would sort of be uh, th- that a collector can only make a decision once they've consulted the list, the hierarchy, the rankings, that a card must check all of the boxes, that it must meet all the criteria, that it must have a certain level of significance, and even if the card doesn't activate a single cell of excitement in your body, that you still are obligated to it, that you still must go for it because of where it ranks, because of what it means. And so that's the idea of the spreadsheet collectors, is somebody who can't move, who can't think, who can't do anything without consulting this list, and that this list is something sterile, and it's something overly rational, it's hyper rational, it's something that is missing one of the core essences of being a sports card collector, which is the irrational passion of collecting based on feeling, based on emotion, based on excitement, based on all those things. And so, I sort of fed this into ChatGPT, and it kind of helped me break up these different competing schools of thought a little bit. So I just kind of want to go over what it said too. It says, there's the passion first approach, which I characterize as the non-spreadsheet approach, but it's characterized in the affirmative, instead calling it the passion first approach. This school argues that collecting is emotional. Let your emotions lead. When a card strikes your heart, that's a signal. Don't second guess it with endless comps and pop reports or trying to time things. Quote, overthinking kills the moment, end quote. If you hesitate, you might never see the card again. Mistakes, overpays, that's part of the journey, that happens. Any regrets you might have will likely fade. This is the philosophy of immediacy and joy, prioritizing experiential richness over analytical optimization. It resonates with collectors who see the hobby as an art, not a science. And then here is how it characterizes the other school: the research and restraint approach. This view says that yes, passion is central, but unchecked passion can lead to regret, overpaying, or building an incoherent collection. The best long term satisfaction comes from preparation and planning and discipline. Form a theory of your collection, set goals, learn the landscape, understand rarity, condition nuances, historical pricing, market cycles. And then when a target card does appear, you are ready to act decisively, knowing why you want it and why it's worth what it is worth to you. This is the philosophy of curation and foresight, treating the hobby more like a craft that's refined over time. And then it sort of explains, like, what is the tension? This isn't about buying strategy, it's about a clash of values. Do you collect for the rush of the chase and the raw love of cards, or for the pride of a thoughtfully built collection? And so then I engaged further with GPT, and I sort of said, how help me take this debate outside of the realm of sports cards for a moment, and help me import this debate into some other field. And let's see if we can learn something about it by seeing how a similar debate has arisen in other arenas of life. And so GPT did just that. I believe it fed me 4 analogs. The first one, the first analog it came up with, which I really enjoy the philosophy of science. I took a course on it and several courses adjacent to it in undergrad, and I find that it's one of the most interesting subjects for sort of thinking about all the different elements of philosophy as they emerged in the 20th and the 21st century, sort of, which is science, and how the ontology of science, the epistemology of science, all the logic of science, everything. Just science is such a good case study. But anyway, the philosophy of science. GPT explains, in the philosophy of science, there is a classic distinction between the context of discovery, which is how scientists come up with hypotheses, and the context of justification, which is how hypotheses are then tested and refined and validated. Thinkers like Karl Popper emphasize that genius often comes in the form of a flash of inspiration, such as Einstein's thought experiments. But these aha moments, these flashes of inspiration, they are not enough to count as science. True science requires moving beyond the justification phase, where you then begin to actually evaluate, test, and refine those insights using rigorous methods. And GPT concludes that the two collective philosophies map onto this. The passion first school is all about the discovery, the flash of inspiration. And then the research and restraint, or the spreadsheet approach, that's all about justification. That's about the collector as the scientist, carefully vetting and assembling a logically coherent collection. And so GPT also sort of helps bring them together, that they're actually both part of collecting, that they're both part of science. That the aha moment, that the flash of inspiration is an irreplaceable part of the development of hypotheses in science, and it's an irreplaceable part of the energy that motivates us to collect. But but it doesn't really reach the level of science, or doesn't really reach the level of collecting until uh, that moment is then evaluated and tested in the broader context of science, or in the broader context of a collecting philosophy. And I happen to think that that's pretty darn good. I think that's a pretty darn good analogy to sort of bring us back to thinking about how these two worlds intersect. The thing that I come back to with the non-spreadsheet approach, which I'm an advocate of, I think that the irrationality of collecting, that the joy of collecting, the thrill of collecting, the impulse of collecting, I happen to think that that is very important. In fact, it is in some ways the lifeblood of sports card collecting, and that if that was taken away and we sterilized the environment, we cleansed it of those emotions, and we turned it into something that's just a purely rational calculation based on a mutually agreed upon hierarchy of cards, that that the things that are the very essence of what makes sports cards collecting so enjoyable will disappear, and that the whole enterprise might crumble if we don't have the thrill of scrolling eBay and just seeing that card that stops you in your tracks. But the unquestioned premise that I want to bring to the table, and I happen to raise this as a topic on one of my appearances with Jeremy Lee months ago, and the question I ask is this: where does that flash of inspiration come from? Where does that feeling in your gut of like, oh, this card is special, I want this, where does that come from? And more to the point, if we can identify where it comes from, can we also change? Can we condition ourselves to invoke the idea of habitus from the realm of political science and sort of revolution? Not to make this too dramatic, but can we inscribe on ourselves new and different symbols that actually modify and impact our aha moments and our gut reactions to things down the line. And I do think you can. I do think you can. I don't think the gut instinct is purely deterministic. I don't think that you have to just say, well, this is the one that hit me in the feels. So, that's how the cookie crumbles. I think upon investigation, we'll see that a lot of the same materials influenced us. I think, to some extent, the Beckett magazines that we read as kids, to some extent, the cards that end up getting a lot of airtime and promotion in social media content today. I think market pricing and sort of, wow, cards from this set sell for a lot of money, and it sort of signals to us it must be very important. And I think there's all of these things happening on a micro psychological level in our brains to sort of add up to what our gut sentiment is, and sort of helps on this unconscious level, or sort of on this beneath the surface level. It sort of totals up to the things that end up impressing us, and leaving it up to chance like that. On the one hand, there is a strategy there, and this is something that I've always struggled with the logic of, or the anti-logic of, irrationality, is that once we've discovered that irrationality is actually strategic. So sort of I sketched the case for how irrationality, it's actually rational to want to have irrationality in the hobby, because irrationality is fundamental to the hobby. So sort of I've broken the irrationality of it by acknowledging that it is rational. It is productive. It is constructive. It is optimized. It is optimizing for the end goal of having fun in this hobby. That allowing it to be irrational actually is a rational goal. And that contradiction I've always struggled with it. And and I don't know that there's a great resolution to it. And this goes back to this sort of idea of the law of non-contradiction, which is, can something irrational also be rational at the same time? But there is some sort of wiggle room there. There's just some sort of idea that maybe the irrational is sort of taking a gamble. Like, in the context of political revolution, the irrational is sort of this idea that, for example, if you're in a totalitarian regime, it's never rational to speak out against it, right? You're just going to get you'll just be made an example of. But if there are no irrational people who rise up and, against the odds, try to overcome the system or overthrow it or change it, if there's nobody out there who's willing to be irrational, or if there's no willing to be, might even be the wrong turn of phrase, if there simply is nobody who it is irrational, then the regime never gets overthrown. So sort of, in order to get the rational outcome of displacing an oppressive regime, you need the irrational actor who's willing to do it, who's willing to take the gamble. And sort of then transposing that back to card collecting, the irrational element is that just, you come across something and you don't really quite know, like, is this as special as my gut instinct is telling me? How rational or irrational should I be about it? Maybe that's the rub, is that taking the gamble is preserving the irrationality of it all. But I think you can. But anyway, I think you can, to get back to this point of uh, of of how do we? Is there any level of control that we can exert on our gut instinct? And I think the answer is yes, when we start breaking down all those factors I was breaking down about what influence us. And so then, if moving forward, if in the very important time in between those aha moments, so if the aha moment is, one day, in April, just let's just say I'm scrolling eBay and a card just really emotionally activates me, and then I go months and nothing really speaks to me, and then all of a sudden it's September and I'm at a card show and I see another card that really speaks to me. There's this downtime. There was the months of May and June and July and August, and what was happening in the downtime? What was happening there? Were you consuming YouTube content of people walking around shows, and sort of subconsciously was influencing you? You say, oh man, everybody's sort of rallying around this card, or oh, this big important guy bought this really rich guy bought this card, so that must be really important. And even if you're not consciously thinking it, it's being subconsciously drilled into your brain. and how, and to what extent is that informing your opinion? So to what extent are conversations you're having with other collectors informing your opinions? To what extent is all the things in the past, the nostalgic connections and so forth, reading those old Beckett magazines, to what extent is that influencing what ultimately results in that flash of inspiration, or that moment of browsing eBay and suddenly something speaks out to you and captures you? And so if in those in between months, those months in between the flashes of inspiration, if we if I intentionally inscribe on my mind, or inculcate my philosophy with rational approaches, with things that with the making of the spreadsheet. This is where the spreadsheet comes in. If the downtime is spent making and refining and learning the spreadsheet, and getting very intentional about what content that I take in and that I allow into my collector brain, and being very exclusive about content, so not just passively consuming stuff, and not just say, well, I'll just turn this on, and but if I turn that off, and if I just really curate my experience in the downtime, then am I actually helping to shape what my next flash of inspiration looks like? Am I helping to shape what it will be that hits me in the feels the next time? And I think I am. I think that is possible. And that's where I think the non-spreadsheet and spreadsheet approach intersect, and that's where or put better, that's where they overlap. That's where each can inform the other. The spreadsheet approach needs the infusion of passion. It needs the infusion of the excitement and the energy to act. And the non-spreadsheet approach needs the downtime to deliberately consider which forms of stimulus are going to be allowed to operate, that then on the unconscious or on the subconscious level end up influencing what it is that ultimately produces the next flash of inspiration. Let me go through here and see if GPT, some of these other analogs. So like another analog I had was expressionism versus classicism in art. Expressionism is art as raw emotion, and classical is art as planned and proportioned and aligned with established theory. And so some of the expressionists are Van Gogh and Pollock, and some of the classicals are Da Vinci and Raphael. And GPT says collectors, the passion first collectors, are like the expressionists, obviously. They are looking for instinctive and visceral experiences. And the spreadsheet folks are more like the classicists. They want harmony, balance, and a larger vision. Then there's the third analog, which is drawing on military thought. There's the warrior who thrives in the heat of the moment, charging with the spear in hand, contrasted against the general who plans for years in advance, orchestrating campaigns with patience and foresight. And so I don't think we need to explain how the non-spreadsheet and the spreadsheet maps onto this. And then the fourth one is Plato versus Aristotle on knowledge. Plato emphasizes knowledge as intuition. Aristotle on empirical observation and classification. So Plato more aligned with the non-spreadsheet, Aristotle with the spreadsheet. So, having done that deep dive, that will bring us to segment 4, the final segment of this show, which is a pickup. And before I'll say what the pickup is now, and I'll show it. All right, so this is the pickup here. I didn't prepare a scan of it, which I should have, but you can see it on the screen. Anyway, I'm holding it up. And the pickup is the 2015-16 Excalibur. That's the name of the product, manufacturer Panini. Product line Excalibur. 2015-16 Panini Excalibur, Nikola Jokic base set, 1 of 1. And it's a 1 of 1 of 1. So it's the only 2015-16 Excalibur base set is this black 1 of 1. All right, the black 1 of 1 from 2015-16 Excalibur, Nikola Jokic. So let me use this as an illustration of the overlap of the two approaches. because I as I reflect back, I think it actually speaks to that. So first, um, spreadsheet. This spreadsheet that I have pulled up is the total list of every one of one of Nikola Jokic from his rookie year, of which this Excalibur is one. So there are 38 in total, including base set, including inserts. There are 38. This Jokic Excalibur is one of them, a one of 38 in that regard. And so I have the checklist here, and then I have this checklist partitioned into two sections. I have all of Jokic's base set one of ones, of which there are 20, and then I have all of his insert set one of ones, of which there are 18. Within the base set, there are three. Well, there are three different types of a card. There's just the pure base, there's auto, and there's patch auto. And within the inserts, you have the pure insert, you have the patch auto insert, you have the auto insert, and then you have the insert with patch only. So, we're getting down to the more granular levels of classification. The ones that speak to me the most as a collector are the true base, sort of echoing the discussion about Michael Jordan stuff earlier. And sort of you can see how my collecting in other areas impacts Michael Jordan collecting, and the opposite is true too. But here you can see that I've prioritized the one of one parallels to Jokic's base set, and even more to the point, his first appearing base set cards, because in the product of replay, he has several, I guess maybe 4 appearances in replay's base set. So the one that I would prioritize is the first appearing among those 4 true base set cards. So this checklist is very instructive to me because, sort of, for my taste, and again, this comes down to taste. Some people like patch autograph cards better as a rule. They just simply prefer them, and they don't really care if it's base or insert. Or some people like inserts better, or some people like patch autographs that come from the base set better. Some people like autograph base set cards. I mean, there's lots of different configurations, lots of different ways to approach this. For me, I like the simple, just the simple true base set, and then the one of one parallel to it. And so in total, there are 10 of those in Jokic's entire catalog. He has 10 cards from his rookie season that are one of ones and parallels to a true base set card. And they are Prism, Totally Certified, Donruss, Excalibur, Select, Flawless, Limited, Clear Vision, Threads, and Replay. And my collecting goal here is I'd like to get all 10. I have 4. I have the Prism, I have the Totally Certified, I have the Donruss, and as we've been showing here, I have the Excalibur. This spreadsheet is extremely helpful in me figuring out the cards that I think have the resume, so to speak, that provides the justification for a truly passionate pursuit. If I can bring those two worlds together, if I can unite passion and justification. And the Excalibur, belonging to this group of 10, knowledge of that fact elevates it from obscurity to an incredibly coveted item. That step of classification elevates it from a product that they don't know much about and I don't really have much connection to. I mean, back when Christina and I were first getting into the hobby, we did open some Excalibur packs. This was during 2016. Like I do have some historical connection to Excalibur from collecting contemporaneously with the 2015-16 season. But it's a pretty weak link on the level of nostalgia. But on the conceptual level of it being one of the 10 base set 1-of-1 parallels first appearing for Nikola Jokic. Absent patch, absent autograph. All of a sudden, it has a tremendous aura and status. And Excalibur as a product, if I sort of hastily put this spreadsheet together maybe a year ago. So I'm always not 100% certain that it's 100% accurate, but I think it's close. I put together a spreadsheet of every basketball set ever, and I try to trace its lineage. And so to me, it looks like with Panini as the manufacturer, Excalibur has just a 3-year lineage as a standalone product. I'm not sure if it ever went into Chronicles or into something else. It probably did. But as a standalone product, I've got noted here 3 seasons: 2014-15, 2015-16, and 2016-17. 3 seasons of Excalibur, and that cuts in multiple directions. On the one hand, it's very limited. So there won't be 10 Excalibur Jokic 1-of-1s out there. In fact, there's just 2 to the base set. So there's a 16-17 Jokic 1-of-1 to the base set, and there's a 15-16, and that would be the rookie year one, and that's here. And obviously, he was not in 2014-15. So here's a different spreadsheet, sort of influencing me and helping me sort of figure out on paper, if I remove the eye test bias, and if I just sort of stack up these 10 different ones on paper, Excalibur has it doesn't have the lineage factor in its favor. It just has 3 seasons, but it does have the uniqueness factor in its favor, that there's only a total of 2 base set Excalibur 1-of-1s ever for Jokic, the rookie season and the second season one. I've never seen the second season one, but that information compels me to want it. And that's something that, like, I would have no idea. Up until I did this research, I didn't even know if it existed. I didn't even know if he had more than one. But now that I know that there's a second one, all of a sudden it's on the radar. And I am certain that if I was just browsing my eBay safe searches later today, and that second year Excalibur Jokic 1-of-1 base set shows up, I know I've trained my mind to understand how significant that card is. I've instilled the concept, the idea of that card without ever having seen it. I instilled it with an aura. That aura being that it's the companion to this. That it would make such a magnificent pair if I put it together with the rookie year Excalibur 1-of-1. And so that's where the spreadsheet meets the experience. And that certainly was the case when I acquired this the rookie year Excalibur 1-of-1. So now I'll get to the acquisition story of it, and then we'll wrap up this episode. So the acquisition story is simply this: I was browsing the page of fellow Jokic collector Big Chungus Cards, who has a really cool PC. He has other Jokic 1-of-1s that I covet as well. I was browsing his page. This was in January of 2025, and I saw this card, and I'll tell you, I must have browsed his Instagram page dozens of times over the years. I really flirted with the idea of collecting Jokic in 2021, and then a few months later, a few months into 2022, I acquired his Prism Black from 2015. And then at that point, I'm a full-fledged Jokic collector, obviously. No turning back. and so over that period, ever since at least the Prism Black up until January 2025, so that's rough, almost a 3-year interval. And I know him. We chat occasionally in the Jokic collector chat, and we chat otherwise. And we'd actually done a deal for like a Luka card even before we did this deal that I sold to him. I think it was him. Anyway, I must have looked at this card on his page dozens of times. He had posted it a few different times. I'd seen it show up a few different times. It was never graded. It was always in the one touch. Which the way cards present in one touches, I really enjoy. So all the factors were there, right? Like, this guy's posting a rookie year base set first appearing Jokic 1 of 1. That's a very special, rare card. There's only 10 of those that have ever been made and ever could be made. But I didn't, at some point I made this spreadsheet. I really didn't start like refining it until last summer, really like digging into it. Or maybe it's a little bit before that, but absent this spreadsheet, I would just browse over the card, and it didn't give that flash of inspiration. But then, like I said, like around last summer, I started really digging into this spreadsheet and constructing it and performing a very thorough level of research and sort of identifying the 38 rookie year 1 of 1s of Jokic, and then classifying them further to narrow down to the 10 1 of 1 parallels to his 10 first appearing base set cards with no memorabilia, no autograph. Those 10 cards sort of being the ultimate Jokic chase cards for my collecting taste, and this Excalibur belonging to that group. And then at some points, I don't think it just happens instantly. I think it happens over time. But then on that day in January 12th, I guess is the date of purchase. Maybe it's a day before that or something. But I know it must have been that day. I was just browsing his page and I was just like, oh man, I need that card. That card is phenomenal. That card, all of a sudden, a card that because I changed the context of the content that I'm taking into my brain in between purchases, and I got very deliberate and intentional about the content that I'm taking in. That instead of passively ingesting content that I just so happen to see on social media, instead of getting very intentional about what content I'm filling my brain with, all of a sudden this card jumped off the screen. It just reached out from the Instagram profile on my phone, just reached out and grabbed me. And I was honest, I was just overwhelmed by how badly I coveted this card. And the flash of inspiration struck. And it's striking how that inspiration didn't exist until I perform my research, and then I let the research sink in. And the research sinking in has lots of dimensions to it. You get an appreciation for how difficult it is to find some of these cards, and you reach this very counterintuitive result, which is that if the thing that's defining what my gut impulse will be is the consumption of content from others, that's creating a bias in favor of cards that are available or visible. And that the cards that are the rarest, and if rarity means something to you, then this is what makes things ironic. The cards that are rarest are the ones that are never seen, but because they're never seen, they'll never, as long as you're passively consuming content, just sort of scrolling to for your hobby experience, that you'll never know they exist. And then when they do show up, you'll just browse right by it. You'll just walk right by something that just because it never had the visibility, it never was able to activate the surge of emotion, the surge of desire that can only be filled in, and that can only exist with the proper content channels filling into my brain. And I quite literally lived that out, where in a state of less knowledge about Jokic's card catalog, I would just scroll right by that card and it meant nothing. And I would get sidetracked, gazing at some other. I don't want to disparagingly name another card and sort of imply that something else is overvalued or overhyped, or or that collectors over-index on it because it's too available. That's not the point of this section here. The point is to make to fill in the opposite part of this equation, to say that I was under-indexing for cards that were out of sight and out of mind. And the irony of it, or the counterintuitive part of it, is that the cards that are out of sight and out of mind, if actually every card was equally presented and was equally visible, that the ones that are out of sight and out of mind, those just so happen to be the ones that are most appealing, because they happen to be the rarest and or the most desired, and the ones that people keep tucked the furthest away in their collections. So the the that moment of realization, sort of that I think this card, this 2015 Excalibur Black 101 Jokic speaks to, and how information completely changed what it stands for and what it means, and how I interpreted it when I encountered it, and how it meant something completely different upon encountering it. And then finally there's the agency of it all, that I'm exercising maximal agency when I'm performing the research for myself, when I'm making decisions, when I'm reasoning through them, when I have the full menu of information available, and that I'm as intentionally as possible curating which information enters my brain through my senses. That I'm exercising more agency that way than if I'm passively consuming and just sort of letting the information airwaves of social media browsing to define and color my hobby experience, and to ultimately control or influence what uh what cards, what visuals will stop me in my tracks and give me the aha moment, give me the flash for inspiration. A final note, as a sort of rebuttal to what I've just said, and then we'll wrap this thing up. The rebuttal might be something like this. This is great in terms of curating what I've laid out here, this sort of intersection of the two or the overlapping of the two philosophies. It's great for personal fulfillment, for the exercise of agency, for having the greatest depth of understanding, and for really accurate decision making. That's fantastic. But that just isn't quite how the market's ever going to work, because this community and people in general, very few are ever going to get this intentional. But instead, the hobby experience for the vast majority is going to be mostly passive content consumption, and it's going to be mostly content produced and delivered to them, and that the contents of that content is ultimately going to be the primary operator, the primary influencing factor on what ultimately stirs the butterflies in the stomach, on what ultimately causes people to stop in their tracks and gaze at something. That the level to which it's socially constructed, particularly through the passive consumption of produced content, but also engagements with friends who are doing the same thing, sort of reinforcing these things indirectly and directly, that this accumulates over time, and that it's almost better, if one wants to be truly synced up with the market, or synced up with the community, or synced up with the consensus, that it's almost better to let oneself passively imbibe these things, because these are the primary factors that will shape the aha moments, that will shape the flash for inspiration for others when they're operating in the collecting community. And so once this revelation is made, it doesn't necessarily follow that the correct approach is then to really turn inward and focus on this this collecting of data, and this refining of lists. And that stuff can actually end up becoming a little too introspective, and that I'll end up curating a hobby experience for myself that's just it's just detached, because on a practical level, very few people are ever going to go through this exercise. Now, granted, if everybody did go through these exercises, they probably would end up in similar places. We're going to have different value expressions. Like with Jokic, some people are going to prefer, the patch autos over the pure base cards that have no memorabilia, no auto. That's of course a potentiality. But basically, that if everybody did do the same deep dive, and sort of everybody had the same basic values, like we like rarity, and the ways that rarity is created is by short print runs, and limiting to the rookie season, or limiting to the first season, or limiting to a first of some kind. But it just might seem unrealistic for that to be the case, and that instead it's better to sort of collapse into the herd, and then one is insulated from straying too far off the path, and that one is protected by belonging to the group and by ingesting the same general materials that the group is ingesting. And then that will line one up with sort of having the same flashes of intuition that others will, assuming that the influence of content and the passive consumption of produced media plays as large of a deterministic role as I've posited that it does. And I want to end on that. I want to end on that note. I want to end on the rebuttal, because I can keep going back and forth here. Sort of, I've already sort of asserted the positive case and the case for agency, and the case that we can control our instincts to some extent if we want to. Sort of, I've experienced that firsthand, and instead just put both points of view out there, and give the listener the opportunity to consider both. Um, and but I don't think I need to explain which, even given the rebuttal, I don't think I need to explain which path I'll pursue. And I probably could have more to say on that in terms of how I would adjudicate that difference. I went into this once on a Stacking Slabs podcast, sort of explaining how one of the bets that a collector can make when they do sort of go down this path of self-discovery and taking control, asserting maximal amount of agency, asserting the maximal amount of self-determination. One of the bets that they're making is sort of that other people will do the same thing, and it's not abundantly clear that they will. So that, but then the fallback sort of becomes, well, but still, once one knows better, once I know this alternative is out there, will I really find it satisfying to fall asleep at the wheel again and passively consume, or will I find it more satisfying to take control, to take the reins? And I'm going to leave it at that. There is more to say on this topic, but I'm going to leave it at that. And hopefully that's some good food for thought for the next 3 weeks as we pause and wait for this summer break, so to speak. And when the HOJ-Cast does come back in three weeks or so, I'll probably be loaded with experiences and content and ideas and things to talk about. And I actually have a few trade things percolating, and I don't know what I'm going to pick up at the National. Like, I could come back loaded with content and ideas, and we'll just have to see. But I think the next 3 weeks, are going to be like loaded with activity, just like an NBA off season, day one of the NBA off season or something. I think we're gonna come back in 3.5 weeks, and a lot has changed. That's gonna do it. Thanks for tuning in to episode 15. See you guys for 16 in a while.